Good evening. You're watching Legal Helpdesk. This show is about making the law work for you by giving legal advice on topics that matter to you. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno.
And I'm Attorney Nepomuceno. Today we're here at the Alpha Land City Club, and tonight we will look back on the year that was, 2014, and we look back as a year-end special to discuss all the best episodes we've had here in Legal Helpdesk. And over the past year, we've covered a lot of topics, a wide range of topics pertaining to your legal rights, from family issues to family law, to wealth management, and finances.
That's right, Ron. We've also discussed your legal rights on government services and their obligations to you. We also touched on some political issues that became trending topics this year.
First, let's review on what were the most in-demand topics relating to family law. These were the most in-demand topics based on the messages we received on Facebook and Twitter.
And when it comes to family law, it seems that infidelity is one of the major problems. So we've had a lot of questions on adultery and concubinage. And a lot of people also don't know that when you have a cheating spouse, that this is not a ground for annulment. Which leads us to the next trending topic, which is legal separation.
Right, and we also have, of course, annulment is a very important topic for a lot of our viewers.
Which is also very recurring.
It's recurring a lot. In fact, the cases are increasing every year.
Yes, that's according to research.
Yeah.
The trend for the past several years is that annulment cases that are filed each year increase also per year. But the good news is it seems like a lot of people are also building families, because one of our popular topics this year was adoption.
Adoption, yeah, and it's important to note that adoption, the adopted child actually has a lot of rights. No?
They become like legitimate children.
Yes, and kasi in our culture before, parang when you're adopted,
parang second-class child ka ba?
Ampun ka and all that. But under our laws, adoption gives you a lot of rights. In fact,
you're actually better off than an illegitimate child.
Yeah, you're better off because you can inherit not just from your natural parents, but also your adoptive parents.
So doble.
So doble.
But another important part out of all of these topics would be where the remedies can be claimed from. So basically, which agencies do you have to approach, or which courts can you file the right complaints?
Yeah, so we had a number of episodes covering these topics. I think it's about time now that we can watch all of these shows right now. Can you highlight the differences between adultery and concubinage?
Yes, Attorney Rod, that's a good question for our viewers. The main difference is the one who commits adultery and vis-a-vis the one who commits concubinage. The one who commits adultery, as defined in the law, is the married woman who has sexual intercourse with a man who is not her husband. And in concubinage, it is the married man, the husband, who has sexual intercourse under the three modalities or the three ways. And with a woman who is not his wife. That's the primary difference in between adultery and concubinage.
I guess being the only female in this group right now, I find it very unfair, but I'll highlight the main difference.
I'm sure you have a lot of questions.
Yes, and I'll highlight for the benefit of female viewers out there, the main difference. Basically, for women like me, and I'm married, as soon as I commit, I will commit adultery as soon as I sleep with another man who's not my husband.
That's true.
And each count of having sexual intercourse with a guy who's not my husband is one act of adultery, right?
That is correct.
So meaning if I sleep with someone else twice, then the penalty of...
It's twice over.
Exactly.
Those are two charges already.
Two charges already. But for men, basically you have to prove that there are three attending circumstances.
Yes.
That's correct.
I mean, any of the three. Either they have sexual intercourse under scandalous circumstances.
They kept a mistress in the conjugal dwelling, or if not in the conjugal dwelling, the husband slept with her in some other place or cohabited with her in some other place.
So in other words, like if I catch, for instance, my husband sleeping with another woman, I cannot file a case for concubinage against either of them.
That's not concubinage.
Yes. Attorney Russell?
In that case, even if the husband has sexual intercourse with a woman, not his wife, that is not concubinage if you don't fall under those three circumstances.
Okay. Now, the question Is this a case that I can only file against my wife? For example, if my wife has an affair with a married husband or a man who's married, can I file? I don't want to file a case against my wife, but I'll file a case against the paramour or the boyfriend of my wife, and I know he's married. I'll file a case of adultery against him. Is that possible?
In these two crimes, according to the law, Attorney Rod, you need to put the two culprits together in the same information. Okay. Otherwise, the case will not prosper. As they say, it takes two to tango, you know.
Yeah. So let's discuss penalties now. Can we talk about possible penalties for adultery and concubinage?
For adultery, the penalty there is up to 6 years.
6 years?
Yes.
So one sexual act?
One sexual act.
Discretion.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's from 2 years, 4 months, and 1 day up to 6 years.
Wow. So if you had sex several times, I mean,
that's what I was saying earlier. That
yes.
for each one it counts as one offense. But for concubinage, is it the same?
Concubinage is lower. The maximum penalty is up to 4 years. Okay. So that's the difference when
lower
respect
by 2 years.
to penalty.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. Oh,
yes.
yeah.
Okay. First, the basics.
Yeah.
One, what is really annulment and how is this different from divorce and legal separation? Because for Filipinos, we just always say, wala hiwalay na kami. But sometimes you don't know, is it really a legal separation or are you annulled?
Well, if you look at the history of the Philippine law, you can find out that legal separation is a relative divorce. No? They just changed it to legal separation. So but there's a big difference.
But the marriage remains.
Yeah, the marriage remains, and of course, annulment you sever the marriage bond. No? There's no more tie. There's no more.
Yeah. Siguro just to be clear, annulment is really when the court declares that there was no marriage in the first place.
Yes.
Okay, so the couple, when they get annulled, they can remarry again. How is this different from those that are void from the start? Siguro let's talk about annulment. Ano yung grounds for annulment?
Well, we have the declaration of nullity of marriage, and commonly we have this ground under Article 36 of the Family Code. Psychological incapacity. Now, this is really the complaint of so many parties because one, when you go to court, you need to really hire a lawyer for this, no? And then you have to get a psychiatrist to prove that one or two parties are psychologically incapacitated. Now, sad to say, there is no clear-cut definition of what psychological incapacity is. Probably
Attorney Manuel, what guidelines in terms of those decided by the Supreme Court or the courts, lower courts, when they say there is psychological incapacity, what are the normal indications of this?
With psychological incapacity, the party has to prove that the other party cannot validly perform the marital obligations, the essential marital obligations. So once the party is incapable of performing this, then you can go.
And you're talking about physically, emotionally.
Yes.
For instance, failure to support, is that enough? Is that enough grounds for saying that you're psychologically incapacitated?
That's one of the factors that you are unable to cope with the married life. But you know, the court really requires a lot of, I would say, a lot of things to say that there's really psychological incapacity. Like it must be incurable. It has juridical antecedents. You know, it's not just simple as calling a psychiatrist and saying, "Oh, this person has a narcissistic tendency." No, the court will go beyond that. In fact, in so many cases, when you reach the Supreme Court will deny the grant of annulment because they will find the ruling wanting of the requirements. No.
Okay. For instance, if your husband is an alcoholic, can you file for annulment?
No, not necessarily. Alcoholism in itself is not a valid ground. So there ought to be a deeper sense in that addiction in alcohol. Does that enable the person to perform his obligation as a partner or as a spouse?
Siguro that could be a factor. No? The fact that he's maybe an alcoholic maybe it can be a factor to prove psychological capacity, but it can, in it by itself,
Yes.
it cannot. No?
So I guess we have to clarify to our guests, the only ground for filing for annulment is psychological incapacity. So even if you have a wife or a husband who's an alcoholic, a drug addict, or physically abusive, or psychologically abusive, then it's not necessarily something that will support a case for annulment. Although maybe we can tell our viewers that in this case, what they have as a remedy is
legal
separation.
separation. That is the
First, let's go to adoption. And normally these are for people either who want to add to their children or want to have kids. And I guess we first go into a discussion of who are qualified to adopt.
Basically, you're qualified to adopt if you're of legal age, you are mentally sound, emotionally sound, psychologically sound. So in cases of disqualifications, for example, if you've been convicted of a crime involving moral turpitude, then you won't be qualified to adopt. Okay, so of course the age requirement is there. If you're less than 16 yung 16 age difference ninyo, then you're not qualified to adopt.
Okay, all right.
What about minimum age for you to adopt?
So you need to be of legal age, of course.
Which means 18 years old.
18 years old.
Okay.
Now, what are the legal effects, no, when it comes to adoption? I mean, lalo na in our culture, no, sadly, even up to now, when people say you're adopted or ampon, as they would say, there's this stigma, no. But I know from law, from what I learned, no, they actually have more benefits.
That's right.
Can you expound on that?
Well, it's simple, you know. Actually, being adopted raises you to the level of being a legitimate child.
That's right.
No? So, in fact, there are some parents who have illegitimate children who adopt their children to improve their status. No? So, the stigma should not be there. In fact, it is more of a benefit rather than a drawback to be adopted, because you not only become the compulsory heir of your adoptive parents, you also remain the compulsory heir of your blood parents or yung biological.
Yeah.
So you
And I guess,
inherit both ways.
One other thing to clear the misconception that an adopted child is not at the same level as a legitimate child. When the parents, the adoptive parents, pass away, how much is a share of a legitimate child and an adopted child?
Yung legitimate child kasi adopted child has the same share as that of a legitimate child, while that of an illegitimate child has the half share lang.
So talagang parang full-blooded siya.
Better pa yung adopted child.
And he or she, the adopted child, inherits from both parents, di ba? Kung buhay pa yung, let's say, from the adoptive parents as well as the natural parents, right?
That's right. Although may question dyan, no, yung parang sinasabi na dahil dun sa repeal nung Domestic Adoption Act, baka pati yun nasama na. Although there's a position na hindi kasama yung intestate succession dun sa repeal. So dapat pati dun sa biological parents mo, you can still actually inherit.
Wow, we really did have a lot of relevant topics this year on family law. And of course, very helpful guests to help us answer viewers' concerns.
And it's important because I think a lot of people can relate to these topics. No? I mean, people always have family issues and family concerns, so I think that's the important thing. We've been able to address those topics.
Well, I can't wait to find out what other non-family law issues were also popular this past year. But before we do that, we'll have to take a short break. Legal Help Desk will return after these messages. You're still watching the best of Legal Help Desk. Earlier, we talked about legal remedies on family-related issues.
All right, for this next segment, we're going to be featuring episodes where we talked about finances. That's a very touchy topic, Karen. I mean, a lot of families and a lot of people get into conflict because of finances, especially when related to assets that are within a
In
family.
other words,
how you distribute them.
Succession, yung mga mana, right? What you inherit from family. And I remember that episode, Rod. We had so many callers.
We had, I think that was a world record.
Yeah, for
us.
testate, intestate succession, meaning for those who left a will, those who left people or their family behind without a will.
Yeah, and of course, related to that, we also had episodes where we featured wealth management experts, di ba? Kasi again, related to that, whenever you're talking about finances and assets of people, you're also talking about preservation of the wealth and how to make it grow.
And
all that.
for those who think that wealth management is only for the wealthy people, actually, that was a misnomer. As we found out from our episode with experts on wealth management services, they actually are very useful for those who have cash flow problems. So if you are trying to save up money or you have problems having savings, this was a very good and helpful episode.
And related to what you were saying, yung creating a will or writing a will is not just for the rich. It's also for those people not so rich, because it also involves not just assets, but it also involves liabilities and other aspects of your life. Now you want to pass on when you do pass away. No? So now we're gonna take you to some of the best portions of those episodes where we tackled finances, wealth management, and inheritance. Watch this.
A lot of people are starting to realize that we should really plan for death. Meaning, paano mo ba i-distribute yung may iwan mong pera o yung mga kagamitan? So, in other words, yung mana, di ba, na pinag-uusapan. It's usually a sensitive topic, but I think a lot of people are starting to be practical about this.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to point out that inheritance, the word inheritance, most people think it relates to the one who's inheriting it. When in fact, inheritance is actually, in a technical sense, belongs to the testator, no? The one who's gonna. So, and it's a totality, hindi lang yung property niya, but it's also pati mga utang, di ba? And the rights and obligations.
So I guess let's go now to basically if you have properties and you're already planning, not necessarily kung matanda ka na, but this is something we can clarify to people. What does it take to plan for distributing your wealth upon death? Tsaka ano yung advantages of doing that?
Yeah.
It's actually very simple to do a will, as we will discuss later on. There's such a thing as holographic will. Hindi mo kailangan ang
So
abogado.
it's not as complex as
Saka hindi
most people think.
magastos.
Hindi magastos, you don't even need a lawyer. You don't even need any formalities. It's just very simple.
Okay.
And kasi in our experience, it's very sad. Ang pinakamasakit talaga ng mga kaso, yung magkakapatid nag-aaway-away.
Yeah,
And that will happen if you don't do a will and you don't take care of it before you die. Nag-aaway yan. Kasi usually, pag nawala yung patriarch or yung pinakapuno ng pamilya, nawawala yung bond nila, and then may, yung mga hang-ups ng bata pa na paborito itong isa, it crops up. And then yun ang grabing mag-away sa kaso, magkakapatid.
But Attorney Carlo, maybe you can differentiate kung anong effect. If you don't leave a will, paano ba hatiin yung ari-arian mo, and how different is it kung meron ka naiwan na will?
Well, first, let's highlight the importance of a will nga. Like you said, it's something that's catching up. Imagine, let's put into perspective. You want to buy a car or a house. You draft a contract of sale. Now, if you die, you're leaving all of those properties behind. Not merely a house, not merely a car, but everything that you owned, that you worked for. Yet you will not put something in writing. So that is why people probably are taking into consideration that it might be important to look into succession. Now, should we draw a will or should we just leave it to the law? The difference would be, if there is a will, you can control to a certain extent permitted by law. If there is no will, you let the law control for you.
Siguro for the benefit of our viewers, let's give an example. You have a man who has a wife and 2 kids. Without a will, tapos may nangyari dito sa father na to, paano i-distribute yung ari-arian niya?
Let's say walang will.
Yeah, walang will.
Okay.
So we'll go to intestacy. So una yan, you cut it in half because the half belongs to the wife.
Yes, that's
And then
correct.
the remaining half, that's what will be divided
Of
equally.
all the properties to.
Yes.
Again, without being technical, because assuming they got married under
Yes,
after the family code,
yes,
absolute community of
property.
No?
So
half goes to the wife.
Goes to the wife,
Okay.
and then the other half will be divided equally amongst the 2 children and the wife. So, I'm not very good with math, pero siguro one-third sila doon sa
Doon sa value ng other
Yes.
half.
Yes,
Oo.
yes.
So, kunwari, let's say, 2 million pesos, 1 million automatically goes to the wife.
yeah.
The other 1 million, paghahatian pa nung wife and the 2 kids ng equal shares. So, they
Yes.
go 1/3.
So that,
Okay.
in a way, the wife becomes considered as one child, one
That's
legitimate
correct.
child.
One
Yes,
legitimate
yes.
child.
Okay. So, pag yun ang assuming legitimate, kung
yes.
meron siyang illegitimate child, ito yung laging
Dun nagiging
controversial.
complicated,
Sasabihin nila,
Yes.
anak ka lang sa labas, wala kang karapatan sa mana. Pero I guess you can clarify.
Merong karapatan ng illegitimate child. They get 1/2 of the share of a legitimate child.
One half.
And with the onset of the family code, before there was a lull with respect to the adopted children. But with the onset of the family code, at least it's explicit that the adopted child will have the same rights as a legitimate child.
So in this example, assuming walang anak sa labas yung dad na ito, then it's about 300,000 roughly each, the
Yes.
mother and the 2 kids. Pero kung may anak sa labas, then yung anak sa labas pa would have to get around
One half.
Oo, one half of so hindi na tig 300,000.
Pero to clarify, yung mistress wala Yung
Pero
mistress
normally
wala.
during the life yun. During the
During the life na yung binibigyan.
Nakaka-advance. We can start off by talking about what type of, first of all, what is wealth
what is
management,
wealth management
tsaka
and-
what type of services does this include?
So, Fitz, you want
Yeah.
to answer
Fitz,
that?
you want to give it a shot? Yeah.
Well, when you say wealth management, it's basically financial planning or managing your assets or your money. You know? That's why, as earlier said, it's for everyone because all of us has money that we need to manage. No? It doesn't matter if you have lots of it or very little. The thing kasi is, it's not really how much you earn, but how much you keep and save. No? So that's why when you say wealth management, it goes beyond investments. It's also about budgeting, managing or minimizing your debts, and so on.
And what about just keeping your money in a bank? What's wrong? Is that enough money management or wealth management?
Some people kasi, di ba, we all know the line before, di ba, mag-impok sa bangko,
Sa
di ba?
bangko.
Di ba? So is that already what you would say sound financial planning, or there are a lot of other things?
Well, there are a lot of investment options. No? So, basically, for short-term goals, like let's say your emergency fund, your day-to-day expenses, business operating expenses, you have to put it in the bank. So that whenever you need it, you can withdraw it anytime.
Yeah.
But for example, for long-term goals, like let's say sending your kids to college, retirement, let's say 10, 20 years from now, there are several investment options, long-term vehicles for that.
Okay.
Why it's important to talk about estate planning and why it shouldn't be such a morbid topic?
Rod, just as a starting point, Attorney Dong was saying kasi kanina, yung topic niyo pang mayaman na. But I want to erase that misconception. This is not just for the wealthy because to the extent that you have something, the least that you want is to either depreciate what you're leaving to your mga descendants or yung mga may iwan mo. Make it smaller by paying a lot of estate taxes. Kasi kung meron namang way na legal to reduce that, why not, right? So maybe Attorney Dong and Attorney DJ, that's something that you can enlighten our viewers on.
Well, estate planning is first and foremost it's a desire of the living to be able to transmit whatever he has to his heirs at the cheapest possible amount, less hassle. Now, what did they say is basically normally a problem of the rich people is because if the estate is small, you don't even have to pay much taxes already because the bracket will be low.
In fact, what is the bracket? At what rate or the value of the
Well, I
asset
think
that
if
you
it's
don't
up
have to pay
to
any
1
estate
or
tax?
2 million, there's even zero tax.
So
2.2 million probably.
So 2.2 million ng estate mo, but you don't have to pay any estate tax.
Not necessarily if the property left is a family home. So to the extent of the first 1 million, exempted yan. And then meron ka pang straight na 1 million plus the first 200 is zero rated. So in effect, if the value is 2.2 million, even if you proceed with the usual testate proceedings, whether extrajudicial or judicial, hindi ka rin magbabayad ng tax. But again, estate planning is very important because this will give you a better way as to how you would like your property disposed of in anticipation of death or incapacity.
Let's translate it for the viewers na hindi lawyers. When you say limitations, because meron kang compulsory heirs, ito yung mga, for instance, if you have children, you're really required to give property to them. So kahit sa will mo, nakasulat dito that you're leaving your properties to your best friend and to your parents, kahit papano, yung will na yon, before it is satisfied, you have to give the properties first to your children.
You have to give the legitimate, the compulsory heir.
In terms of, kunwari, I want to leave properties to Rod, pero I know that kung sa will, because he's not a relative, I have to give it properties to my husband. I'm supposed to, para isa siya sa mga compulsory heirs ko yung husband ko. If I want to give properties to Rod, now that I'm still alive, then anong types of taxes yung maaaring kailangan kong bayaran because of that transfer of property?
Well, again, it depends on the mode of estate planning that you will enter into. If it is a sale, although simulated man, you will have to be subjected to the capital gains tax. Kung
so
donation naman siya,
donor's tax.
Even if I pay 1 peso lang siya sa akin. Those are really very memorable episodes.
Yes.
I hope that by showing to our viewers a summary of these episodes, that their minds would be refreshed on what to remember when writing a will, or what will happen if you don't write a will, and of course, how to manage your finances.
It's very important to put this all together and organize this, kasi most of the cases that we handle or we tackle involve issues regarding money. So it's very important that everything is
Filipinos pa naman, they're always averse to discussing money matters, but it is very important to plan ahead.
To put it all down, and whenever you invest in wealth management and have wealth management plans, everything has to be all written down and put down right.
Yes. So from family-related issues to finances, but we still have more to discuss. Legal Help Desk will return after these reminders. You're still watching Legal Help Desk, and we are here at the Alphaland City Club.
All right, for the past year, we received a lot of messages on our Facebook and Twitter pages inquiring about government services, specifically SSS and PhilHealth benefits. So, kasi generally, people contribute to their PhilHealth and SSS as employees.
And one thing that we learned from our very helpful guests from SSS and PhilHealth is that first, you have to make sure that all your premium payments are up to date.
Yeah, importante yan. And also, it's good to point out that you don't have to be an employee. You can do voluntary contributions to PhilHealth and SSS. So you can be members of PhilHealth and SSS, even if you're not part of a company. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're a businessman or an artist, you can be members of SSS and PhilHealth. And there are a lot of benefits, a lot of benefits that you can avail of if you're an SSS member. For example, pension. For SSS, you contribute, and when you retire, when you reach the age of 60, you can opt to get your pension, and it's a monthly pension for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and for SSS, for instance, you can have those financial cushions like being able to get a cash advance, for instance, or maternity benefits if you're a mother. So marami talaga siyang benefits, kaya you have to make sure that you are up to date, and this is something you can simply do by inquiring with them or even checking online. They have an online portal for it.
Right, and partner Karen, yung PhilHealth, di ba, in the US, they talk about universal healthcare. It's a major issue when it comes to elections. Tayo, we already have a universal healthcare in PhilHealth. And one of the things that's important, again, you don't have to be an employee. you can do voluntary contributions.
Yes.
In fact, if you're indigent, this is what we learned, diba? If you're indigent, you can be covered by PhilHealth, diba? Yun yung mga natutunan natin. So, so now we've put together and string together some of the best portions of our episodes regarding SSS and PhilHealth. Watch this. The general impression is that you need to be either employed or parang voluntary contributor ka, di ba?
Yes.
So, so Dr. Ish, that's not the case anymore, no? With
Yes.
the new
Right now, really,
rules.
it's mandatory or compulsory for every Filipino to be a member. Actually, our vision is bawat Pilipino miyembro. So that really translates into making every Filipino a member. And regarding the government's action for this, it is so nice that currently with the new law, the RA 10606, the law provides that the national government actually will enroll for the indigents. They will actually provide for the premium subsidy. Unlike before, when the sponsored program will be subsidized by the local government or any private institution for that matter. However, you have to go through negotiations if they will have the budget to actually sponsor indigent members. But currently, under the new law, the indigent program will be subsidized purely by the national government for the premium contribution. And so that's really nice.
But Dr. Ish, I'm trying to visualize this. How can indigents be automatically covered by PhilHealth? Does the government have records of all our indigents and then they pay premiums for them?
Well, even the current law now provides that the Department of Social Welfare and Development would actually look for these indigent members. They are using this means testing, and all these identified indigents would be under the National Housing Targeting System, poverty reduction. Actually, the beauty about it is last year, they were actually 5.2 million families identified. This year, they are increasing that to 14.7 million, and the government is actually paying for the premium contribution for that.
It's part of the 4Ps program of the government, no? The conditional cash transfer. That's how they identify the beneficiaries who do not have the money to pay for the premium. So, so this is where the national government comes in. And I would like to say that this universal health care that was enacted into law was part of the SONA of the president. It was the very first, part of his very first SONA that he wanted to provide universal health care to everyone. And we're happy to say at least this is one of the legacy bills that...
Now, just to get into the crux, before we get into the crux of how to go about being a member and all that, I mean, is this fiscally practicable? I mean, can we really support covering the insurance, the health insurance of everyone? I mean, where are we going to get the funds?
Well, outside of the national budget, which covers, of course, those that cannot afford to pay, we have the sin taxes, which specifically earmark that whatever is raised there would be used for healthcare needs. And so it is not only from the national budget that we're also getting, it's also, of course, from those that are employed in private companies. If we follow strictly also the Kasambahay law, it is the employer of households. If the salaries of the Kasambahay is above a certain amount, then both the Kasambahay and the employer,
I think it's 5,000 pesos if you're
contribute.
in Metro Manila.
If it's less, it's purely shouldered by the employer.
So in a way, Chairman and Ariel, I guess you're the biggest employer in the country, right?
That's right.
It has to be the biggest employer, and so you're in charge of all hiring and firing processes. Attorney, are you in charge of all of that?
Well, actually, appointments in government is addressed to the sound discretion of the appointing authority. Each agency has its own head, who is given the power to appoint its own officials and employees. However, if something goes wrong with their employment or with their appointment, that's the time that they can go to the CSC for some redress. Okay. So, for example, if somebody becomes a victim of an illegal dismissal, illegal reassignment, or any other illegal personnel action for that matter, they can go to the CSA for redress.
Let's say consultants or mga assistant secretaries, ganun.
Consultants are considered employed through contracts of service.
I see. Okay.
Technically speaking, they are not considered a government employee. Because their relationship with the government is not governed by civil service rules. They are governed by the contract which they signed with the government.
Right.
Okay, so they have no appointments. Unlike regular officials and employees who are issued appointments and whose appointments are being submitted to the Civil Service Commission for attestation, because we scrutinize those appointments.
Okay. Chairman Duque, what level is covered by having to take the civil service exam?
Well, practically all. First of all, we have the career service and the non-career. Both actually both are actually governed by a set of qualification standards. No? So if your position is considered a career, you have to have the education, the relevant training, experience, and the civil service eligibility. This is the career service professional examination that one has to take. And then you also have the civil service career sub-professional examination for the lower positions.
Now, Assistant Commissioner, we were talking about this earlier. The employees of the government, they're not covered by the labor code, is that correct?
They are not.
Okay.
They're covered by civil service rules.
Okay. And are those rules drastically different? And what are the pertinent differences between labor code, for example?
Yeah. Well, maybe let's focus, for instance, on one aspect muna, if dismissal. So some people always complain, was I legally dismissed by my employer? But then sometimes if I'm approached and I find out that they're working for the government, I tell them, sorry, but you're not covered by the labor code. So maybe you can clarify, for instance, if you're working for the government, what grounds are there for being justifiably dismissed, or how can you question if your dismissal is justified?
Well, first let me emphasize that the rules that we follow when it comes to determining whether a government official or employee has been illegally dismissed or not is what we call as the revised rules on administrative cases in the civil service, which the Civil Service Commission itself issued. However, if you will ask whether it's different from what is stated in the labor law, well, for one, we're also following the principles enunciated in the Angtibay case. I think lawyers are familiar with that.
Case, right?
So you cannot just dismiss or discipline a government official or employee without giving that person the benefit of due process.
So it's always
the right
due
to be
process.
heard, and there has to be a cause.
Social security system, as the name implies, it provides security, obviously, no. And the first benefit there is retirement. But there are a host of benefits that our televiewers can avail of. So let's start off. What are the benefits that SSS?
Maybe quickly. There's a lot, but bullet points.
Okay, we have the sickness benefit.
Sickness benefit, all right.
If the member is absent from his work due to sickness or injury for at least 4 days, he is entitled to sickness benefit, provided that he has no more leave credits from the office.
So for instance, if you have, under our labor code, you're only entitled, or basically what's mandatory is the service incentive leave. So if the employer only provides a service incentive leave, the generic, and it's not labeled as sick leaves, then you can automatically go to SSS if you're sick and absent.
Yes. And then we also have the disability benefit. So sometimes if the sickness continues for more than 120 days, then he is entitled to disability benefit. It's either
like
partial.
one third of the year.
It's either partial or permanent. And then we also have the maternity benefit if this is for female members up to 4 miscarriage, deliveries, or
Is the price for cesarean higher than normal delivery?
Actually, we give longer. Kasi if normal, we give 60 days, but
60 days worth of the pay.
if the CS section, it's 78 days. So it's longer. Kasi the rationale is that it is longer for a CS to heal.
And Attorney Dory, before we move on to the next benefit, my question is, if you have an employer that already provides for maternity benefit, can you get both benefits from your employer and also from SSS?
Or do they exclude each other?
I think they exclude each other because the purpose of actually all the payment of benefit is a parang substitute for the loss of the income
so
that you incurred during.
You can't claim twice.
Yeah.
Is that
Unless you are unless it is under the Magna Carta of Women, because under the Magna Carta of Women, benefits are given to women on gynecological problems, so they can also so double recovery.
We hope that the information we provided about SSS and PhilHealth memberships and benefits were helpful to you. And we have a lot of other issues to discuss, so please stay tuned. Legal Help Desk will return after this short break. Welcome back to Legal Help Desk, and today we are at the Alphaland City Club for Legal Help Desk year-end episode.
Now, over the past year, we had some very high-profile personalities who guested on the show. Former secretaries, department secretaries, former senators, just to name a few. And again, they helped us to highlight some of the most important and pressing issues in the country today.
Yes, starting with, for instance, from the Department of Justice, we had Secretary Hieronimo C., who talked about bail and plunder.
Yeah, and we also had former Senator Sagisag talk about charter change.
And that is a very colorful episode with, of course, Senator Sagisag having very witty remarks.
Yeah, and it's been an interesting year in a way because we had the pork barrel scam, the DAP issue, and of course there was always this call for charter change.
Yes,
so,
and to talk about the writ of habeas corpus, we had someone who personally had an experience being imprisoned during martial law. We had attorney J.V. Bautista.
Yeah, so we've strung up the best snippets from these episodes and put them all together just for you. Watch this. And obviously everyone is reading it in the papers. There are a lot of things going on. And for a lot of people, it's just going like this. No? They kind of don't understand what's going on, what are the processes and all that. And obviously, the technical or legal meaning of plunder vis-a-vis
graft. Or in the first place, maybe we can explain why the PDAF scam is relevant. Meaning, because of the PDAF, what can you file against those people who are involved?
It's a timely topic because not a lot of people understand the relationship between graft and corruption cases and plunder. The way you look at it, graft and corruption cases in general is the range of criminal behavior that is that prohibits public officials and of course including the complicit private persons that are against their violation of their public duties and public trusts. So that is general graft and corruption cases. Plunder, because we've seen that graft and corruption cases are not as effective so far in our history as a country. So plunder was designed as a law specially for big graft and corruption cases that have breached 50 million pesos and above. So the policy of the legislature, which is the plunder law, Republic Act 4020, is actually to come up with heavier penalty for those that are bigger in nature in terms of amount. So you look at the subset of plunder as a part of the bigger set of a graft and corruption case.
Okay, so just para clear to the public, give examples of just graft and corruption cases, for instance.
There's so many cases. One is if you're entrusted with public funds, the use of public funds, you're supposed to use it judiciously. You should not use it for private interest. For example, you would have a construction of a road or an airport or seaports. Whatever fund that is given to you, should be used only for that purpose and only used optimized so that the maximum public benefit can be done. This is the concept of taxpayers' money.
And this also applies to the level of even, kunwari, yung mga clerk sa government agency offices.
Yes.
Pagka pumayag sila na mga fixers, for instance,
Correct.
And they're aware, tas they're working with the fixer
Correct.
para mapabilis. That's graft and corruption.
Pero in that case, no, you're not talking about government funds. Because if it's, let's say, bribery or let's say parang under the table, you're talking about the fund of another person.
Correct.
So that's another form of graft and
so
corruption.
so plunder wouldn't be that, right?
Correct. In the sense that it's not the quote-unquote what we know as a fixing kind of naglagay ka ng 50 pesos, 100 pesos to expedite a transaction. That kind would not fall under plunder simply because we always hear complaints of why there is no big fish. Why do we always go against the little 2,000, 5,000, 100,000 cases? And for the really big fishes that we're seeing, which is similar to the PDAF cases now, why are we not seeing these cases out of the woodworks? And perhaps partly because of the times and the good governance platform of the administration, you would see also these things coming out. And on all these cases are not happening for the first time. These things have been there since the beginning of several administrations, but it's only now that it's coming out of the woodworks and actually being translated into cases.
Senator, you were obviously part of that in those
before the 1987
well, before the 87 Constitution, and you're involved there, and we saw we witnessed this 1987 Constitution being put together. Now there's a lot of calls, no, about charter change, and they call it cha-cha. Let me ask you. Our first question is cha-cha a bad word? Is charter change a bad word in and by itself?
Not in itself, dahil any constitution being the work of men can be perfected or improved. And in fact, sa ating kasaysayan, ito ang pinakamahabang walang modification eh. Yung
So, since
1898, short-lived. 1935, in a few years, amended. 1973, na ang tawag namin doon, Siopaw Constitution. Sino sa inyo may gusto ng Siopaw? Taasan ng kamay. Lagay mo, 99%. And then, 1986, freedom. Yung 1986, the work of appointed delegates. But that was how the U.S. Constitution was enacted. It was the work of appointive delegates. Kaya wala sa wala sa election o appointment. Ngayon, meron tayo ng 87 and it has not been modified in any manner, shape, or form for the last almost 3 decades. So it's time na pag-aralan natin dahil maraming JBC, yung term limits, masyado bang maiksi.
Senator, may pinagkaiba ba ang revision of a constitution and amendment of a constitution from a legal perspective?
Well, ang usapan nga ngayon, yung pasok ni Speaker Sonny Belmonte, yung economic provisions daw to attract foreign investors dahil mukhang kulang yata sa local sources. And then, ang pinag-aawayan ngayon, yung extension.
Sounds so highfalutin when you say habeas corpus.
Because it's Latin.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what does it mean?
Well, literally it means you may have the body.
You may have the body.
You may have the body because it's an old English concept where a court order, which they call a writ, is issued to find or to produce a certain person who is supposed to be under custody. So now, we have adopted this concept. It is in our Constitution. Everybody enjoys the privilege of the writ. Okay. So when you talk of suspension, this is what I learned early in my law school days. It is not the writ of habeas corpus that is suspended. It is the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus that is suspended. Now, habeas corpus, the writ of habeas corpus, is a privilege which gives anybody the right, or rather the remedy, to ask a court for the production of the person, the body of a person who is detained. He can be detained by police officers, by law enforcement agencies, or he may be detained by a private institution. Like, for example, a mental institution.
Can it be a private person?
It can be also a private person. The use of habeas corpus recently in custody cases is really of fairly new, new development. Yeah, in the past, when you speak of habeas corpus, especially in the martial law days, it was really about looking into the detention of disappeared people, disappeared students, student leaders, for example, labor union leaders, who may have been arrested.
So there was a political side or aspect to it.
Yes, because habeas corpus is really the great writ of liberty. It really pertains to the liberty of a person. But the application nowadays has expanded to include even those who are, for example, questioning their being in a mental institution, for example, because sometimes somebody can be brought by a relative to a mental institution, and he can ask through any representative to be
freed from that.
To be freed.
Yeah.
And that's all the time that we have for tonight. It's been a great year, a fantastic year for Legal HD, and we'd like to thank you, our viewers, for all your support, for always watching us and always throwing us questions on our Facebook and Twitter pages. Let those questions keep on coming in. I'm Attorney Nepomuceno.
And I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. If you have any questions, you may post these on our Facebook and Twitter pages. Join us again next Monday, which is already 2015.
2015, wow.
As we discuss your legal rights. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. A lot. In fact, the cases are increasing every year.
Yes, that's according to research.
Yeah.
The trend for the past several years is that annulment cases that are filed each year increase also per year. But the good news is it seems like a lot of people are also building families, because one of our popular topics this year was adoption.
Adoption, yeah. And it's important to note that adoption, the adopted child actually has a lot of rights. No?
They become like legitimate children.
Yes, and kasi in our culture before, parang when you're adopted,
parang second-class child ka ba?
Ampun ka and all that. But under our laws, no, adoption gives you a lot of rights. No?
Yeah.
In fact,
you're actually better off than an illegitimate child.
Yeah, you're better off because you can inherit not just from your natural parents, but also your adopted parents.
So doble. No?
So doble.
But another important part out of all of these topics would be where the remedies can be claimed from. So basically, which agencies do you have to approach, or which courts can you file the right complaints?
Yeah, so we had a number of episodes covering these topics. I think it's about time now that we can watch all of these shows right now. Can you highlight the differences between adultery and concubinage?
Yes, Attorney Rod, that's a good question for our viewers. The main difference is the one who commits adultery and vis-a-vis the one who commits concubinage. The one who commits adultery, as defined in the law, is the married woman who has sexual intercourse with a man who is not her husband. And in concubinage, it is the married man, the husband, who has sexual intercourse under the three modalities.
The marriage bond. No? There's no more tie, there's no more
Siguro just to be clear, annulment is really when the court declares that there was no marriage in the first place.
Yes.
Okay, so the couple, when they get annulled, they can remarry again. How is this different from those that are void from the start? Siguro let's talk about annulment. Ano yung grounds for annulment?
Well, we have the declaration of nullity of marriage, and commonly we have this ground under Article 36 of the Family Code. psychological incapacity. Now,
And
this is
favorite
this is really the complaint of so many parties, because one, when you go to court, you need to really hire a lawyer for this, no? And then you have to get a psychiatrist to prove that one or two parties are psychologically incapacitated. Now, sad to say, there is no clear-cut definition of what psychological incapacity is. Probably
Attorney Manel, what guidelines, in terms of those decided by the Supreme Court or the courts, lower courts, when they say there is psychological incapacity, what are the normal indications
With
of this?
psychological incapacity, the party has to prove that the other party cannot validly perform the marital obligations, the essential marital obligations. So once the party is incapable of performing this, then you can go.
And you're talking about physically, emotionally.
Yes.
For instance,
right?
failure to support, is that enough? Is that enough grounds for saying that you're psychologically incapacitated?
That's one of the factors that you are unable to cope with the married life. But you know, the court really requires a lot of
These are the three ways. And with a woman who is not his wife, that's the primary difference in between adultery and concubinage.
I guess being the only female in this group right now, I find it very unfair, but I'll highlight the main difference.
I'm sure you have a lot of questions.
Yes, and I'll highlight for the benefit of female viewers out there, the main difference. Basically, for women like me, and I'm married, as soon as I commit, I will commit adultery as soon as I sleep with another man who's not my husband.
That's true.
And each count of having sexual intercourse with a guy who's not my husband is one act of adultery, right?
That is correct.
So meaning if I sleep with someone else twice, then the penalty of...
It's twice over.
Exactly.
Those are two charges already.
Two charges already.
Correct.
But for men, basically, you have to prove that there are three attending circumstances.
That's correct.
I mean, any of the three. Either they have sexual intercourse under scandalous circumstances.
They kept a mistress in the conjugal dwelling, or if not in the conjugal dwelling, the husband slept with her in some other place or cohabited with her in some other place.
So in other words, like if I catch, for instance, my husband sleeping with another woman, I cannot file a case for concubinage against either of them.
That's not concubinage.
Yes. Attorney Russell?
In that case, even if the husband has sexual intercourse with a woman, not his wife, that is not concubinage if you don't fall under those three circumstances.
Okay. Now, the question is this a case that I can only file against my wife? For example, if my wife has an affair with a married husband or a man who is married, can I file? I don't want to file a case against my wife, but I'll file a case against the paramour or the boyfriend of my wife, and I know he's married. I'll file a case of adultery against him. Is that possible?
In these two crimes, according to the law, Attorney Rod, you need to put the two culprits together in the same information. Otherwise, the case will not prosper. As they say, it takes two to tango, you know.
So let's discuss penalties now. Can we talk about possible penalties for adultery and concubinage?
For adultery, the penalty there is up to 6 years.
6 years?
Yes.
So one sexual act?
One sexual act.
Discretion.
Yeah. Okay. So that's from 2 years, 4 months, and 1 day up to 6 years.
Wow. So if you had sex several times, I mean,
that's what I was saying earlier. That for each one it counts as one offense. But for concubinage, is it the same?
Concubinage is lower. The maximum penalty is up to 4 years. Okay. So that's the difference when
lower
respect
by 2 years.
To penalty.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. Oh,
yes.
yeah.
Okay. First, the basics. One, what is really annulment, and how is this different from divorce and legal separation? Because for Filipinos, we just always say, wala hiwalay na kami. But sometimes you don't know, is it really a legal separation or are you annulled?
Well, if you look at the history of the Philippine law, you can find out that legal separation is a relative divorce. No? They just changed it to legal separation. So there's a big difference.
But
of course.
the marriage remains.
Yeah, the marriage remains. And of course, annulment, you severe.
Good evening. You're watching Legal Helpdesk. This show is about making the law work for you by giving legal advice on topics that matter to you. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno.
And I'm Attorney Nepomuceno. Today we're here at the Alpha Land City Club, and tonight we will look back on the year that was, 2014, and we look back as a year-end special to discuss all the best episodes we've had here in Legal Helpdesk. And over the past year, we've covered a lot of topics, a wide range of topics pertaining to your legal rights, from family issues to family law, to wealth management and finances.
That's right, Ron. We've also discussed your legal rights on government services and their obligations to you. We also touched on some political issues that became trending topics this year.
First, let's review on what were the most in-demand topics relating to family law. These were the most in-demand topics based on the messages we received on Facebook and Twitter.
And when it comes to family law, it seems that infidelity is one of the major problems. So we've had a lot of questions on adultery and concubinage. And a lot of people also don't know that when you have a cheating spouse, that this is not a ground for annulment. Which leads us to the next trending topic, which is legal separation.
Right, and we also have, of course, annulment is a very important topic for a lot of our viewers.
Which is also very recurring.
It's recurring.